Well, rain eased very early this morning. The rainfall that we've seen over the last 36 to 48 hours cleared through with the cold front that moved through overnight over Tasmania. That's very welcome, of course, but the event's not over yet. We did have something like 398 millimetres, record-breaking rainfalls across northern Tasmania. Great Lake, as I said, had 398, and that was over generally 24 hours, which is quite remarkable. Other locations in the 48 hours to 9 a.m. this morning, Lake Mackenzie had 320 millimetres, Fisher River 312, and there are a number of other locations around the north of the state, particularly the highlands, around the Tiers and the northeast highlands, with more than 200 millimetres of rainfall recorded. And broadly speaking, across the north there was 50 to 150 millimetres of rain. Some of those broke October daily records, and many of the locations that broke records had a long history of records, some cases more than 100 years. So it's a very, very significant rainfall event. In terms of the other phenomena, winds, of course, they've eased down. The damaging surf that we had on the east coast is easing now. Yesterday we saw significant, highest waves up to about 7 metres on the east coast before the Maria Island wave rider buoy went off air. But of course the most significant feature at the moment is the ongoing flooding that's a result of those historic rainfalls. Major flood warnings are current for the Mersey, the Meander, the North Esk, Macquarie and the River Ouse, Ouse in the Derwent River Basin, of course. Flood peaks are likely to be the highest on record in some of those places along the Meander and the Macquarie at Cressy. The North Esk at Coral Inn and the Mersey at Latrobe may peak around the June 2016 levels, which itself was an historic event, of course. There's a moderate flood warning for the South Esk, and a minor flood warning has just been downgraded for the time being at least on the Forth River. There's significant flooding continuing on coastal catchments in the northwest, the north and the northeast still. It's a dynamic situation with respect to the flooding, so communities should stay up to date with the latest forecasts and warnings via the Bureau website and the weather app, and follow the advice of emergency services.
Good morning all, Dermot Barry, Chief Officer, Tasmanian Fire Service. As you just heard, there's still a long way to go, and we remain at heightened levels of alert. But what we have seen now is the benefits of the whole of a state approach to how we manage emergencies. Cooperation between local government, private enterprise, community groups, state and federal government, plus our dedicated staff and volunteers, have ensured that we work together seamlessly to ensure the safety of the Tasmanian community. We've also seen the benefits of the uplift in our capabilities provided through this new State Emergency Management Centre that's provided us with the technology and the collaboration tools to be able to assess intelligence in real time and make informed decisions to protect the Tasmanian community. The emergency is not over. It's important the community continues to monitor our warning messages and follow our instructions and within those messages. It's also important that people continue to look after their own safety. Thank you.
Leon Smith, Acting Director of State Emergency Service. As we've heard from the Bureau, significant rainfall events, in fact record breaking. As the event continued overnight, we saw a number of significant rises in the riverine areas and flash flooding around the state. This event is not over. We still have sustained effects of that rainfall. It's all accumulated at high levels within the state, and it's making its way down through those riverine systems. Over the next 24 hours, it's anticipated that due to both tidal, the tidal situation, as well as the fact that that rainfall is still, that's accumulated, is still continuing down the catchments, we will see ebbs and flows within the catchments. It's not a time to become complacent within Tasmania. the critical message: if it's flooded, forget it. Do not be tempted to enter floodwaters at all. Police will talk about that further in a moment. We've seen a disregard for that message. In addition, the calls to action that are currently in place as far as emergency warnings and evacuate, if they're still in place on Tas Alert, they're still relevant. Don't be tempted to disregard them and return. Just as we've scaled up these warnings, we have a proportionate approach to actually bringing them back down. It's not as simple as the fact that the rain stopped. We can now turn those warnings off. It's absolutely critical that they're done in a staged and appropriate manner based on intelligence. And as we've heard from the Bureau, there's potential for the levels to still fluctuate. State Emergency Service were busy overnight, as were other emergency services. I'd just like to echo the sentiments of the Chief. The collaborative approach in the planning effort has enabled success to date as far as this event. We're not becoming complacent. We're continuing to resource the State Operations Centre and the Regional Operations Centres during the period of this sustained event, and we're still planning for the next 48 hours out. Tasmanians need to do the same. They need to be aware of the fact that this event has not concluded, and they need to continue to maintain situational awareness and go to Tas Alert for information relative to current warnings. Emergency service phone lines 000 and 132 500 have still been used in instances by the Tasmanian public to be able to get routine information. It's absolutely critical. Just as a reminder, as of yesterday, the Tasmanian Emergency Information Service hotline has been established. If Tasmanians have a need to make routine inquiries, they can call 61 455 303, 24 hours a day to gain information, routine information relative to this event. And just a reminder, if it's a life-threatening situation you find yourself in, it's 000. If it's an emergency situation requiring SES, it's 132 500.
Thank you. Jonathan Higgins, Assistant Commissioner, Tasmania Police. I think it's important we acknowledge the Tasmanian community and how they've responded to the advice that we've been providing from the Emergency Centre for evacuations or preparing or otherwise. And on a whole, everyone has been doing the right thing to keep each other safe. But we still do have some that feel they can drive through the floodwaters, and we've had instances this morning at Deloraine where somebody was stuck in a four-wheel drive. Just because you're in a larger vehicle doesn't mean the floodwaters won't either sweep you away or actually stop your vehicle, as was the case in the middle of the floodwaters this morning. So it's really important to keep heeding the advice. This is one of the most significant weather events we've had for some time, and it's not over yet. As the floodwaters continue to rise and fall, as the water comes down from the mountains where most of the rainfall has been, the situation will change. There will be still a large number of roads that are closed, a large number of bridges that are affected, and I implore the community to not drive through them. Let us get about our work, the emergency service, to keep you safe. The councils are closing roads as well. If you don't feel safe in your house and you haven't been asked to evacuate or to prepare to evacuate, there are evacuation centres you can go to, or go to family and friends. There are the evacuation centres you can go and just talk to the other people there if you like, and get a drink and just reset before we move the next few days. But it's important to understand that over the next few days that the flooding will continue. It'll change in the river systems, and as the larger systems come down, particularly the southeast comes into Longford and through Hadspen into the Trevally, and it will change things.
Can you speak to the situation at Deloraine that you mentioned? What had to be done to help those people who were stuck in the floodwaters?
I can. So at 6:30 this morning, a four-wheel drive went into floodwaters on Highlands Lake Road. Called for assistance, which is absolutely what they should do once they're in trouble. But the helicopter was deployed but couldn't actually reach them because of the power lines, so they had to be rescued by search and rescue in the end, which diverted resources again away from the greater efforts around the north and northwest of the state to get them out. But they were extracted safely from their vehicle, but they did have to sit on their vehicle for a while till that actually happened.
Was their car submerged in water?
Questions.
Oh, no,
Can we wait to the end? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so
All right.
it has
Might just wait Tony.
Sorry, I thought...
It's all right.
Okay, Tony Wilmot, Tas Water Acting CEO.
So late last night, we contacted the SES for assistance with one of our dams at Lake Isandula, just south of Ulverston. The dam had certainly filled more rapidly than we'd thought it would in the afternoon, with exceptional rainfall in the area of around 130 millimetres. The dam was actually had an inflow of around 70,000 litres per second, which is equivalent of an Olympic-sized swimming pool in every 30 seconds. So the dam certainly got to a risk of overtopping, and that's where we contacted the SES to assist with relocating some of the residents below the dam.
Are we going to circle back for questions or just?
Yeah, all right. If you're happy to go first, we can resume.
I bet I know what he's going to ask.
Was the car submerged then in that situation?
So the vehicle at Deloraine was submerged enough to stop the vehicle from working, unable to be started again, and that can happen by a vehicle just going into to a certain point. You do see full drives that have snorkels and so forth, and there's that perception you can go into anything, which is not necessarily going to be the case, particularly in the fast-flowing rivers we experience now. So the message is, don't go into floodwaters, don't drive in them, don't walk in them, don't play in them, and if you need to move from an area that's under threat of flooding or being inundated, move out early so you can get your family and loved ones out.
Were there any other instances of cars being stuck in floodwater?
Can you just ask that one?
Sorry, were there any other instances of cars being stuck in floodwater across the state?
No, not as many overnight, over the last 24 hours. We had a number of campers that were stuck at Myrtle Park late yesterday when the floodwaters came around them, but they weren't at risk themselves where they were, they just couldn't get out. So they were safely extracted as a whole and made their way back to Launceston, to their homes or to the evacuation centre at UTAS.
You mentioned
Sorry, you go, Josh.
You mentioned there was a diversion of resources that could have been better spent. What would be the potential, or what could be the potential impact of resources being diverted to save people who probably didn't need to get themselves into a situation?
So the community needs to understand that emergency services are still dealing with normal business. So in the policing context, whilst there is a flood event or a weather event occurring and there are roads being closed and evacuations actually occurring, there are still crimes being committed, family violence matters to attend to as well. So police still need to be able to respond to business in the community to keep everybody safe, not just those that are affected by the weather event.
On the radio this morning, a man said he and his family were stuck in a house at Liffey. Do you have an update on where that's at?
There was a family stuck in a house at Liffey, a family of 6. An attempt was made with Surf Life Saving Tasmania, who have a swift water rescue capability that work in collaborative with Tasmania Police Search and Rescue to get them out of the house. The situation was too dangerous. They believed that they were safe in the house as they were. It hadn't inundated the house, and they remained there overnight. And they were checked on this morning, and they were fine.
So Surf Life Rescue, what did they use? What kind of vehicle did they use to aid in the assistance?
So Surf Life Saving Tasmania provide the swift water rescue for Tasmania, the capability for Tasmania Police and Search and Rescue. So they use their watercrafts that you probably see on the beaches at the surf life-saving clubs, and they're very well trained, very well versed in it from being in the surf, and perform that function very, very well.
In terms of the flooding, I don't know whether this is a question for you or someone else, but in terms of the flooding, when are we expecting the worst of it, or is it already passed?
Yes, it will be a question for the Acting Director.
Are you able to speak just how dangerous and unstable the situation in Deloraine is?
From a policing perspective, I'll speak to that, but I'll let the Acting Director talk about the situation. So the floodwaters are very high, as higher than we've experienced for a very long time, if not the highest. So the dynamic situation there, Deloraine are very used to having flooding, the community, with farmlands and so forth, as it comes down through that river system there. But it's probably not going to be the locals that will experience the adverse effects of it, because they will know where to go and where the water will actually lap to at their houses. So in a situation like that, if you are travelling into areas, make sure you watch the roads, look at the roads that are closed, and if you see water ahead and it's not a road that has been closed at that time, contact police through our radio room and let us know, and we'll make sure that the road is closed so it's safe for everyone.
Back to you. The flooding that we've seen in Launceston, has that peaked at the moment, or are we expecting it to? I know we've spoken about fluctuations, but has it reached potentially its highest level?
Yeah, so we've used throughout this event, given the intelligence from the Bureau, we've used the data from 2016 flooding event to inform our actions and to inform our pre-planning. The systems that actually feed into the Launceston area are being actively monitored. At this point in time, the status of the system is what it is, and I'll be very apprehensive to allude to the fact that it's peaked or otherwise at this point. It really comes back to the fact that there's still a lot of water that's got to make its way down the catchment. It's expected that within the next 12 hours we will have greater insight in regard to the peaks, which, as I've said before, are also influenced by the tidal effect. The situation is still extremely dynamic, and there is potential for increased fluctuations of significance in all of the catchments over the next 24 hours.
How many call-outs have you received over the last 24 hours, and what have been some of the main things you've been called out for?
Yeah, so State Emergency Service, from a request for assistance perspective, have been very active. The request for assistance we've been receiving in regard to homes that are inundated outside the flooded, like the flooding areas, if you like. So it's those things associated with rainfall events of significance where we've got inundation into homes via the roof, the plumbing system on the roof, and things like that. So we haven't been, for an event such as this, by proportion to what we usually get during rain events, we haven't been busy at all. We haven't exceeded 60 requests for assistance around the state during this event, is my understanding at this point. Where we have been busy is actively engaging within the community to be able to provide community advice in a timely manner and reassure members of the public in regard to the situation, but also what actions they can take to prepare themselves and at what point they should act to continue to make themselves safe.
There's only been a small number of people in the evacuation centres so far. Are you expecting that to rise today?
No, we're not, but we are, very much aware of the fact that the number of people within the evacuation centres is proportionate to the situation as it evolves. So those centres will remain open for a period until such a time that they're not required anymore. It's anticipated that they will be open for an extended period, and we urge people to maintain awareness of where those evacuation centres are, so that in the event they need to actually leave, they've got somewhere to go. We've seen a trend over the last 24 hours that the majority of people who have relocated to loved ones or family members outside the risk area, which is another good element. The other thing I'd like to say at the moment is, as part of the operational response to this event, there will be aircraft movements within the northern and northwestern regions. That's an intelligence gathering aircraft that's absolutely critical to us to enable us to better understand the inundation levels and to help inform the current situation in the best interest of the state. These activities also are used to inform the recovery effort. It's critical that Tasmanians are aware of the fact that we do use aircraft routinely. They don't need to be alarmed if they see increased aircraft movements. However, the use of drones is prohibited, and will actually ground our aircraft resources that are operating in that area. Now, drones are readily accessible. The hobbyists have them, and please don't be tempted to use your drone in an area to get overhead vision. It's going to impede our operations, which is going to be detrimental to the recovery of the state.
Can you talk to us about the areas of most concern at the moment and what you expect them to be later today as well?
Yeah, so the Railton, Latrobe area, the Deloraine area, the Mole Creek area, all of those areas that currently have warnings. If people go to Tas Alert, you'll currently see the current warning levels, and proportionate to that, you'll see a number of road closures, which clearly indicates the areas of significance around the state. My understanding is that those areas will remain of concern until such a time that we get to a point where all of the waters have subsided and we start to see, like the riverine systems receding.
Is ooze currently an area of significance, and what's the situation like there?
Yeah, the location at ooze has potential to increase the levels to the levels seen in 2016. There have been some mitigation works undertaken in ooze. It is of concern to us. We have people on the ground. We have the Bureau and our hydrologists actively monitoring the situation at ooze. We've door knocked, we've notified people, and we've got a current call to action in place for ooze, and that will scale proportionate to the situation as it arises. Below ooze, at this point in time, we don't anticipate any issues of significance.
Did you find that communities were better prepared this time around compared to the 2016 floods now that they were given better notice?
Oh, look, there's no doubt. When irrespective of the hazard, irrespective whether it's fire or flood, there's no doubt that community preparedness is the key. We know as emergency service organisations that we need to invest in the community prior to such events, and if you live within an area of known risk, you need to know that prior to the actual event. Very proudly, the state government's invested in funding to undertake the flood mapping project that commenced post-2016. There's been a number of initiatives that have been put in place to lead to this situation whereby communities are more informed, the operational response authorities are better informed in regard to the potential consequences, and the priority is early notification to public, which I'd like to thank the media for. You've been exceptional in this event to enable us to get on the front foot, articulate our messages to the public. It's absolutely critical, and yes, I do believe that that has been part of the success to date of this event.
Do you have a couple of areas specifically that you think that this flood mapping has really uncovered that were at risk and it turned out that way?
Yeah, so we've 2016 at that point was an unprecedented event, and although we used those boundaries, those flood boundaries to inform our operational response in this instance, we've seen instances during this event, as you've heard from the Bureau, with rainfall events that are record breaking, and we've seen those impacts actually exceeded by comparison to 2016. So the part of the intelligence gathering today is actually to map those levels to better inform our response plans and community protection plans in the future.
Sorry, just to double check, what are those areas where evacuate now warnings are in place for?
Just excuse me for a second. Second day in a row. Okay, so emergency warnings with a current evacuate now message, a current for Meander, St Patrick's River, Mersey River, North Esk River, and earlier this morning it was downstream of the Taswater situation that we spoke about earlier today, which is in the process of being removed. I mentioned earlier about the fact that these warnings are taken very seriously, and there's a lot of analysis that actually, and a lot of inputs in regard to putting these warnings into place. It's very methodical. If the warnings are still in place, they are still current. We will actively monitor the current status of the warnings proportionate to the situation and downgrade those when it's safe to do so.
Is it anticipated that any of those in particular will be downgraded by the end of today?
No, I wouldn't like to say, as I've said, we've got no certainty in regard to the catchments and the flows down those catchments. The advice there is refer to Tas Alert for those current warnings. That is the only point of truth in regard to the current situation.
I just have a couple of questions on Lake Isandula, if that's all right.
Yep.
Taswater.
First of all, how do you say it?
Like it all right?
I'll do it.
Can you talk to us about what the situation is there right now and how under control it is?
Yes, so it is under control right now. So overnight we've seen a significant reduction in rainfall in the catchment, so we have seen a lot of reduction in that place now.
Okay, and so you initially sort of evacuated or told residents to prepare to evacuate. That's not going to be the case very shortly?
So the SES will make that call once we've finalised our dam safety inspection.
What did those inspections uncover? How close to bursting point was that dam in particular?
So the dam did reach a point where it was within half a metre of overtopping. That was our concern, where if it did overtop, we'd have flow running down the face of the dam, and that could run away with the foundation.
And sorry, did you say you made any releases during that time?
Yeah, so we were releasing, obviously the spillway was under full release, and we also had a 750mm scour which was also under full operation.
And just in layman's terms, how much of a danger can that pose if a dam of that scale was to burst?
So there is around about 750 megalitres of water in that dam that could certainly wipe houses out and certainly provide certain risks to life.
But so just to confirm, there's nothing structurally wrong with the dam?
No, there's
nothing.
nothing.
Just a concern that there might be if it was to overflow?
That's correct. So the dam got to a point to its maximum operating level. It went above that. So the dam usually has that around the 720 megalitres of water in it. It went up to about 840 with significant inflow.
But now that threat's been neutralised now and there's no chance?
It has downgraded, yes.